Recording. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It is September 13th, 2 days after the major day that changed our lives with TSA and many other things. So our hats to all those who laid down their lives for everybody that day. Fire department, first responders, police, and many others that were heroes that day. We have a great guest today. I'm happy to report that, in Austin, Texas, the temperature has come down into the 80s, which is like, we're almost like wearing jackets. I mean, it's like really cold. People don't know what to do with themselves. So before we get rolling, I'm going to ask John Butler to play some music.
Crazy for feeling so low, and I'm crazy for feeling so low, and I knew you love me as long as you want it, and then someday you leave me. Somebody hurt me. Why should I let myself be wondering what in the world should I do? And I'm crazy for thinking that I love you. And I'm crazy for crying, crazy for crying. I'm crazy for love in you.
Ooh. Well done, Johnny. How are you doing, John Butler?
I'm just doing fine. I would be hitting golf balls now if I were not here. As you said, in the great city of Austin, Texas, the weather is finally coming down to a reasonable temperature, and we're all putting on coats. And of course, this is one of the newsworthy items of the whole year about the weather. I mean, with the exception of sometimes we have hurricanes in Louisiana, we have all kinds of earthquakes in California, but the weather has taken front and center in conversations, in the news, what's happening and what happened in Hawaii. I'm trying to think in my memory, that is for the entire world and indeed the entire country, the drying up of rivers in different parts of the world. The river has been there, but it's gone. So the weather is the show. So I was thinking that when we look at all the things that's happening and around the globe and think about what's been the biggest show, where you've got the presidential political stuff. But I tell you, I think the weather has taken a back seat, a front seat to the politics. And then when we look at the weather here, the question is, hey, will the grid go out? We had so many warnings about the grid going out. And of course, we're more conscious of it now. So, lots of things going on in the world. The wars are going on, and the starvation is going on. People are trying to put the economies back together. And it looks like to me, for the first time in my memory, for the entire world, it's all about the weather.
Well, before we switch to anything else, I want to congratulate the Longhorns for beating Alabama.
Thank you very much. I've been there many times with my alma mater, LSU, and I said to the head coach, go up there, and when they say, welcome to Bama, throw a water ball at them. We're not here to shake hands. We're here to play football. I was very impressed with my students to go up there and to beat Alabama. But we got to beat Wyoming now, and then we got to beat Kansas.
Yeah, well, that's going to be, that's going to be a hurdle right there.
That's going to be a hurdle. We're worrying about a basketball school and football. It looks bad. Yes, great victory for the Longhorns.
Absolutely. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well, and I agree with Johnny. The great news story about time and in my history and journalism, we tend to have talked about the story as opposed to the article you're working on or line of inquiry, or the big story, which is the continuous story. In my case, the continuous story has been at different times, different things. But for a long time, it was the energy crisis. I think the big story now is the weather. But unlike most stories, we can't do very much about it. There are no bad guys to be found, no fingers to be pointed, no smoking guns lying around. We're in a time of global change. We don't know its dimensions. We don't know whether if we stop putting all carbon into the atmosphere, whether that will really correct it. Across the world, there are perturbations, there's aberrations. As I've said several times, the Zambezi River nearly dried up. It's recovered now. We have, even as we're talking, unbelievable floods in Libya, maybe 10,000 people known to be dead. Tremendous flooding hit Southern Europe, particularly Greece. The situation is, and we've seen the heat dome in this country. In Texas, I believe you went on for like 6 weeks with temperatures over 100 degrees. This is unbelievable. You mentioned the grid, Andres, and it's amazing that it stayed up given the pressure. Now, I made a program yesterday with the U.S. Energy Association. I do these virtual press briefings that I put together and chair. And it was interesting. We had 2 Texans on. We had our friend from CPS, and we had somebody from a small rural electric cooperative, and they were operating flat out. I mean, everything has been stretched. But they told me, they told the audience, which was quite large, that their real worry now is winter. That gradually they've become winter peakers, not summer peakers, and woefully unprepared technologically in terms of the equipment they bought years ago for a winter peak. So there's a lot of scrambling going on, a lot of uncertainty. It used to be when you spoke to chief executive officers in utilities and you said, what's worrying you? What keeps you awake at night? They would say cybersecurity. Now they say the weather. So Johnny is right on there, and we don't know what this is going to, whether there's a permanent realignment of ocean currents, of wind directions, whether we're seeing a weakening of currents, which could affect global weather, whether the oceans are so hot that we can't expect them to really go back to ambient temperatures for a long time. So it's a very disturbed picture weather-wise. And on top of that, there are all the normal disturbances of human life. We have a war going on, which seems endless and brutal and ruthless and purposeless. We have ups and downs in economies. The US economy is doing quite well. British economy lost 0.5% in July. And Britain is in serious trouble. Its infrastructure is decayed. It's reaping the price of leaving Europe. And so from country to country, Germany lacks any central leadership. Its industrial production is down substantially. And that's the picture of the world, in trouble, but with something new. The background is unknown and unpredictable weather.
Well, I hear you both. And, as I remind the audience, we are really focused on digital transformations at this program, and very interested in our guests sharing their journey of that. And today we have a wonderful friend, Amanda Justice. For those of you who really want to get to know her, she actually goes by AJ. And she's from Austin. But let's say hello to Amanda, because she actually has a little bit to tell us. She's on a road trip of something that maybe all of us would want to do someday. Amanda, how are you?
I am living the dream. No complaints whatsoever.
Tell us about it. Where are you? What's going on?
Well, so my husband and I had this dream of touring the country and going to see all 50 states, and we're less so focused on the big cities and more so focused on the small towns, which I think are the jewel of this country. Honestly, there's been uh, so much excitement in every small town that we've gone to in terms of what they have to offer. Like we skipped New York City altogether. We didn't even go. We went to all the small towns in New York. But we've been on the road since last August of last year, and we are not back in Austin until October of next year. So we've been at this. We dropped our last one off at Texas Tech in August of last year, and we stopped long enough to get him out of the RV, and we hit the road, and it's been uh, probably the most amazing experience of our lives. And it's ultimately why I'm at ServiceNow, because I was at ERCOT before that, and we could not work out of state. So, I decided, who wants to take this nerd in, and ServiceNow said, we'll take you and you can work anywhere you want. So it's been a great experience. Although I do miss my ERCOT family, I would have retired there if I could have. I loved working there so much.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you are proving now that actually working from anywhere, as long as you have broadband, is not only possible, but maybe the way to do it going forward.
Yeah, Starlink. We have Starlink. So it's been
go.
a game changer. I have better connectivity in this RV than I did at home.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say there's a great book entitled Blue Highways. And this guy stayed off of the interstate and toured all of the small towns in America. His name was William, can't think of his last name, Blue Highways.
Blue Highways. Okay, I'll check it out.
Huh?
I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. So let me ask you this, if I may, as you tour, how do you see the spirit of America in terms of all the problems? And let's just get with electricity. And you see any variation on how people utilize electricity? Did you go up and see the people in Pennsylvania who have no need for electricity? How have you viewed what you do and what you've been doing in Austin in terms of the context of your travels, with a big emphasis on electricity usage?
Yeah, well, it's funny. My husband spends a lot of time every time we go by a substation or a generation plant or any kind of electrical entity. He'll go, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" So I spend a lot of time educating him about the power grid. But I will tell you that it's been surprising how hot it's been, even up in Maine. When we went up to the tip of the border of Maine, it was hot in the 90s when we were there. And that was very unusual. I went to school in Boston, and I just remember the summers just being, 70s, low 80s. So I was quite surprised, to Llewellyn and your points that you've been making about just the temperature of the travels there. And it's very difficult for this region of the country because a lot of these homes don't have air conditioning. So it's been a difficult summer for them. That's been a key thing we've heard from a lot of the locals. What good news about the RV is we have air conditioning. We'll have it everywhere we go. But I definitely got the feeling from a lot of the locals that this is unusual. This has been a very unusual summer.
Well, let me ask you this: if you were to pen an essay on small town America, as a touring journalist, are people moving there? Are they alienated from large city life? Do you find them to be quite different from large city life? Are they discussing things that we worry about? I mean, you walk into a cafe, what's the general climate of their attitude of what's going on in the country? And especially, do you see a lot of people moving to small towns, or are they just dead entities now?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we're driving through a lot of them. One of the things that's clear when we're starting to go through a small town is how strong their chamber is or their city council in terms of their development of that community. So the communities that are embracing, the traditional downtown main streets are flourishing, and people are moving to that area to leverage that small town feel. And then you go through another town that's been dead for decades, and everybody's kind of lackluster about that. So it's just a drive-through little town. But the ones we tend to stop on are, you can tell the city council have kind of come together to create that hometown feel, and create that environment that makes people want to stop and get out of the car and walk Main Street and shop and that kind of thing. So I would say that's a common theme, as a strong chamber, strong city council, you know, planning around upgrading their infrastructure, having common standards of the types of upgrades they want to make to the property to kind of keep that eclectic feel. You can kind of see where people are doing that well and where towns are not doing that well, right? That's kind of obvious.
Yeah, so you're able to integrate your position as the chief technology officer for energy and utilities on what small towns are doing as you travel to small towns.
Yes, yeah, embracing that Main Street world, and that's what's going to get people there and build the economy, and making sure you have the infrastructure that can support the growth once you do that well is always important, I think.
Thank you.
Llewellyn?
You're welcome.
And this is very interesting. What decision, or what do you think about, having seen the rest of the country, a large tranche of it, what have your views changed about ERCOT and the electric, the standalone grid, which is ERCOT, compared to the rest of the country, which is interlinked?
Interesting. So I was at ERCOT for about 5.5 years. I was there during Winter Storm Uri, and certainly all the aftermath of that storm. So right up in it in terms of how the viewed us at the time, which was quite negative, right? That was a difficult time in ERCOT's history. But I think we also shined at that point, and we had amazing leadership that kept the grid from collapsing, that saved the day. And now that I've got to interact with, right now I work with about 260 utilities around the globe. And they all ask, tell me what happened during ERCOT, Winter Storm Uri, and how they reacted and what you learned from it. And so when I'm interacting with other utilities on a regular basis across the US, they have their own challenges as well, right? And so they love to learn from us and us from them on what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, and how we can learn from each other to build operational effectiveness. I don't get a lot of slack the fact that ERCOT's on its own. I think ERCOT's actually performing quite well if you look at the diversity of their portfolio and how strong their renewables are. It's greater than any other segment of the US, in my opinion, in terms of the investments that are being made there. So I feel a lot of jealousy from particularly some of the other ISOs I work with to have that kind of flexibility of being on your own. But I think I wish we did have, looser regulations between the interconnects where we could take on more power if needed from the East and West. I think we need to make some changes there where we could take on more in case we could help provide power to the East or the West, especially if our grid's performing well and they're hurting from some kind of storm. I think that's something I hope that we look at doing in the future, and kind of connecting that. But I think staying isolated has been a benefit for them.
Amanda, what is it that you yourself do for your utility clients?
So ServiceNow is a huge cloud platform. We have about 260 plus customers on our platform, utility customers. We have tens of thousands of customers from all across industry verticals, and I focus a lot on utilities. In the core platform, the way most of y'all out there might think of us as an IT kind of request management or ticketing system is where we started. So our CEO is the former CEO of SAP, Bill McDermott, and came over to launch ServiceNow well over a decade ago with Fred Luddy, who was our founder. So he's kind of moving us towards beyond ticketing, where we're building industry workflows to service these particular industries. And one use case that I'll bring up that I think it's pertinent for this discussion is while I was at ERCOT, we used ServiceNow after Winter Storm Uri to build a weatherization and inspection solution on the platform to do inspections of generation and transmission distribution providers. The legislative folks at that time wanted ERCOT to do a lot more inspections of these facilities to ensure we're prepared for these extreme heat and extreme cold events. And I don't think you would ever thought ServiceNow does weatherization and inspection of generators. I mean, we built that on the platform. At the end of the day, it's a workflow solution. You can throw out any business process and configure a workflow to solve for it. So the use cases where I'm focused on are those use cases that are impacting the utility. So right now, I'm building out a bunch of NERC SIP demos. We just built out a huge demo for NERC SIP 7 and 10. We're doing some for SIP 2, 9, and 13 next, which will be rolled out this quarter to show how the platform can help them meet these regulatory requirements, secure these assets, whether they're, NERC assets or non-NERC assets. And putting this information in the cloud wasn't really an option for utilities until last year. There was some ServiceNow released some cybersecurity capabilities in the platform that utilities have to have in order to put BCSI into the cloud. So I spent a majority of my time helping customers get onto the platform with this data. And then we start kind of chasing down some of the challenges like OT management of assets and IT management of assets, that kind of thing. That's
how are you preparing? How are you preparing for artificial intelligence?
I don't think we're preparing. I think we're leading the charge on that. We've made some acquisitions in the generative AI space. So if you think about, let's take a use case, if you have any kind of asset that has an issue with that asset, some kind of error or some kind of challenge with that asset, think about how we could potentially never even have to open a ticket for that problem, where we would see that issue, a ticket would open, AI would register, we know what the issue is, the issue gets patched, the ticket gets closed without any human intervention at all. That's all AI from end to end, if you think about different use cases. Or if you want to give that capability back to the user, where they just open up their Teams chat and say, I have this issue on my laptop. And the chat bot would come back and say, well, based on this issue, here's how you resolve your issue, all through AI. And agent chats, in which we all probably have interacted with some of those kind of scenarios when you've opened tickets and things like that. So ServiceNow has been a leader in implementing that across the platform. And we've made a few acquisitions in the last 6 to 9 months that we're targeting these AI solutions across these industry verticals. We just acquired a new one a few months back for the retail sector. So they're going to keep acquiring and keep building to leverage AI across the platform to help. Our goal at our own organization is we never want anyone to ever have to open a help desk ticket. I mean, for those of us that are listening, that's a pretty bold goal. Never open a ticket for help desk ever. That's our goal. How can we use a platform like that? It's pretty exciting.
I think it's pretty interesting. And you've got a comment from me on the IT cost reduction given AI. I mean, if we look at the whole movement of business enterprise, and if we look at the value proposition, one of the great value propositions, especially with your platform, is of course cost reduction. Can you talk about, since there's nobody to pull a ticket anymore, can you talk about in the aggregate, if you will, what would be the impact on, let's stick with AI, on going across the different platforms for reduction costs as you interact with different kind of industries around the industrial sector, not just the utilities?
Well, so I'm going to talk about utilities because that's the one I'm digging in the most and where I think we have billions of cost takeout across the globe if we can do this right. So, if you think about a utility that's trying to get a handle on all of their assets, understand where they are, what relationships they have to each other. We already kind of talked about the use case of no help desk tickets. We can clearly see there's a cost benefit of that in terms of self-service and solving problems that way. But think about it from an asset perspective. If you can see and have access to all of those assets and have visibility, you could do things like digital twins, right? You can do testing for that equipment, whatever, without even having to take down a site. That's huge savings. The other big one that I got from another CIO I've been working with is how do we maximize the performance of these assets? We all know those vendors shoot low, right? Because they want you to buy more hardware. But what if we could maximize the productivity of that asset and extend its life and measure it in some kind of meaningful way? That's billions and billions of savings for these guys. On the cybersecurity front, I see a lot of opportunity there as well. So once you have those assets, maybe you could do things like automatic playbooks, where you're initiating the playbooks automatically, adversarial simulation, right? Going after them before they come after us, where we're doing threat hunting in meaningful ways across these assets, because we never know what their plan of attack is. I mean, Home Depot got attacked from their HVAC systems. So we never know where they're going to come in and where that vulnerability may lie. So instead, our CISOs are wanting to try to do proactive type threat hunting. And you can't really do that if your assets are all parsed off across 4 or 5 different systems. And I think from an IT perspective, I think where the cost savings comes in is this is one platform, one data model with all kinds of use cases that can be thrown at it. So you're rationalizing a lot of these systems that are redundant. You're not having to integrate. So it really makes sense for a CIO as well to kind of have a platform first approach and a platform that has this kind of flexibility with workflows that could be built and low code, no code kind of solutions on the platform to solve for problems. But those are some utilities use cases, John, because that's where I'm digging in a lot right now in terms of where those cost savings are in the utility sector.
Very interesting. Kind of do that, you need lots of data and predictive models. That is, in order for us to save, we need to predict where things go. So as your data comes in, and without predictive models, it's just garbage in and garbage out. How do you think about, let's call it the theory for the predictive models? How do you line the variables up to make sure you will have so much data that it goes back to the cost savings? In other words, what are your analytics looking like as you go across platforms? And are you integrating the platforms across industries to learn? Because I think that pretty soon, everything will look alike when it comes to trying to figure out whether it's internet security, whether it's marketing, whether it's cost savings, or whatever have you. So my question is, I'll ask you directly: Are you integrating data from across industries to do your predictive modeling so that the red light does not go up before the red light goes up before the crash?
Yeah, so there are some frameworks that do come together to try to give exposure across industry segments. Cybersecurity is a great example of one where, you may have a risk or a threat over here at this banking institution, but a utility needs to be aware of the same threat. So there's a lot of that collaboration that happens across, industry frameworks and cybersecurity, which might be more parallel across multiple industries. And we leverage those with spokes within the ServiceNow store where people can pick them up and be able to do cross-pollination with our vendor partners. Thousands of software companies who have their products in our store that have, certified APIs into the store that the customer can pick up and do that. For where I see commonality and across our industries, I see a lot of linkage between manufacturing and utilities in that regard, with vendors like ABB and Siemens and GE that are all building some kind of operational technology equipment. And they can pick up those spokes in the store in the future and be able to share commonalities across the equipment and risks to that equipment. There are some, I would say, complementary industries to to utilities that we've been able to leverage. So operational technology is one product that I think can cross over multiple industry verticals where we could leverage some of that. And manufacturing is a really key one. Oil and gas has some strong similarities in terms of the types of equipment models they may be looking at. I know there's a bunch of work that I don't get involved in. We have a human resources service delivery offering as well. And I think there's a lot of cross-pollination between those HR best practices across multitudes of industries. I don't get involved as much in HR because that's not my background, but I see ServiceNow really taking advantage of some of these best practice frameworks in terms of benefits to how to onboard employees and equipment that they might need, and KPIs that they'll measure for, let's say, employee health and things like that, health and safety, those kind of metrics. It just kind of depends, but there's lots of collaboration happening in the technology vendor community that wants to come into the ServiceNow ecosystem and hook on to the platform to do what you just described. There's hundreds of them.
One other question, AJ, then I'll let you go. One thing about utilities, this huge machine, is that the units can be very, very independent. Coming from ERCOT, you know that. We know that we have whether it's oil and gas, in every little county, there's a committee to deal with, right? How do you deal with I'll just say it, the reluctance of the industry, if you will, to embrace change and deal with that independence of thought that's so prevalent in your state, as they come to terms with new technologies for the grid. They come to terms that it's been working like this since 1922. We have a lot of independence, and we're just not sure about jumping on a platform with other people. How do you deal with that independence? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Half of my weeks right now, since our release that produced the encryption capabilities that allow utilities to put this information on the platform. So that came out last September. That's a big part of my work week, is helping them understand how the platform secures it. So they're not, putting their information or data at risk. What I have found, though, I've been here a year, 13 months, 14 months going on. Cyber tends to drive a lot of the transformation, because these CISOs are very concerned about what they don't know. And it's such a huge focus for the CEO to not get caught with some kind of exposure. And it's going to be impossible to be able to do that if you don't modernize how you're housing this information, how you're securing this information. So I would say 8 times out of 10, the CISO, in a lot of conversation I'm having, is trying to drive that innovation. The rest of the time, it's the CEO wanting to do things differently. Like, how do we transform and get to digital twins? How do we transform and maximize our asset performance, that kind of thing, where it's front and center? How do we decarbonize and ESG? And these are some of the conversations where I get drug into on that side of the house. But the last thing I would say is these weather events and these cybersecurity events, they're being a lot more, and we were at ERCOT with using ServiceNow for this weatherization app that our solution that we put in place, is sometimes these events drive different kinds of thinking. I mean, Winter Storm Uri changed everybody's perspective on readiness and doing things more efficiently and better and planning better. So sometimes an event occurs that drives the transformation as well, I think, too. So
Amanda, we have a question about, are we in the industry? Do you see in the industry, do you ServiceNow are using blockchain at all?
We are using a little blockchain, and I've got lots of information around that I can forward. I don't spend a ton of time in blockchain here. It makes a lot of sense in terms of how the life cycle of some of our assets are managed, and how how we want to get to predictive maintenance over time. And I think when I spend a lot of time in the asset area with ServiceNow, clearly because utilities have a ton of assets, but I spent some time with some of our leaders at the beginning of this year on blockchain. A lot of that investment that I can see is happening in financial services. And we have a financial services industry group where they're strongly looking at blockchain, as well as retail. When you think about the distribution engine of these retail systems, with Amazon's a huge customer for us, and blockchain is a kind of a big deal in terms of their strategy as well. We do have a lot of technology vendors who offer blockchain through the platform as well. So lots and lots of opportunity with blockchain with our platform.
It's something like contract management, a target area for that, and signing contracts?
I would think so. I would think so. I'm not involved in that piece at all.
Okay. When you think about, let me ask a couple of quick questions. So when you think about the transformations that are happening, data center management, cloud, cybersecurity, what would you say is the most difficult challenge to overcome as you are convincing a customer to embrace a new paradigm? Is it the culture? Is it they don't have the right people? Is it they don't want to outsource everything? What are the key hurdles?
I think people are a hurdle, right? So I think some of the folks in the utility, we have a challenge, I think, with not only is our infrastructure aging, but our resources are aging as well, and their desire to want to learn things like blockchain, things like AI. It's scary to a lot of folks. They don't know what it'll mean to their business. And the more progressive entities that want to learn more are bringing in chief digital officers, or bringing in folks into their organization who are not afraid to embrace it, and not afraid to educate, not afraid to bringing in people like ServiceNow who have been leaders in this space to use them to transform. But you can kind of tell when I'm in some of those, let's say smaller municipalities, things like that, those tend to be very slow to get off. I mean, the top 10 utilities in the US that are on ServiceNow, they're leading the transformation. They're the first to go for a lot of these things. So I think people would be a big holdup. I would say that would probably be the number one thing that I'm seeing.
But
John, come closer, Llewellyn. Come closer.
Can't hear you. I'd like to build on what both Johnny and Andy, excuse me, have just said, and that is the unevenness of utilities. You have giant utilities, the investor-owned, some of which are very large indeed, and you have very small rural electric co-ops, which may not be reluctant to change, but don't have the resources to change. On the USEA briefing yesterday, I learned that a smaller utility has great difficulty in accessing the IRA money because they don't have the experts to fill out the forms, literally. How do you deal in a country where we need every utility we've got because they all serve different pieces of our geography? How do we deal with this sort of rich and poor effect, which is beginning to become apparent?
That's a great question. I'm actually spending a little bit of time in the last year. I think, Andres, you probably saw FERC issue their cybersecurity incentive program. We met with the folks from FERC to better understand what they're trying to accomplish with that, what their flexibility would be. I think one of their initial intents was to go after some of these municipalities, smaller retailers that can't afford these really big solutions to control cybersecurity in their particular utility, and they're really flexible. They seem to be wanting to be very flexible with the kinds of requests that have come in. It's kind of all tied, I think, Biden's infrastructure, energy programs of trying to get the grid more secure, and specifically addressing some of the economical concerns that these smaller rural utilities might be facing. That's one example that I've been directly involved with, and I've even offered to help them fill out that paperwork, because I could absolutely be willing to partner up and say, let's come at this together. They're willing to collaborate with us. Let's take a crack at trying to solve some of these cybersecurity concerns you have with the platform. The other factor that you mentioned is grants, right? There's lots of grants that they could apply for, but they don't have the people to fill out the paperwork, to your point. And, I think it's just creating an ecosystem of partnership. There's no other industry on the planet, in my mind, that collaborates better than utilities, because we don't compete with each other. I mean, we're all trying to do the same thing: keep the lights on and keep everybody that works for us and our consumers safe, right? And as safe as possible. And we want all of us to be successful on that goal. So I think we need to do a better job of reaching across these aisles and collaborating better with each other, and maybe partnering up with legal teams or compliance teams to help these smaller folks apply for some of this stuff, or maybe even some acquisition consolidation of some of these smaller rural players, and have the larger firms pick them up and try to help bring them along. But I don't know if I have an answer for all of it. I have like niche kind of ideas of how we could help with that, but it's a good question.
Well, I think I'm really interested in your simulation, what you call digital twins, in terms of simulating on the digital twin, which would allow you to simulate real life things, and running the models to show people how they can save money. That is, we've done this in the airline industry. We don't call it a digital twin, but you go fly a simulator, but it's about the same thing. So how can you use digital twins, if you will, to get to what Llewellyn was talking about, to simulate the money that would be saved, to simulate and take out the risk that people are so afraid of. And if you could do that around the globe, or do that in America, it seems to me that the simulation model, the digital twin model, excuse me, is a great asset for moving forward in the industry. So we go from the wind tunnels, okay, to see how an airplane would react. Now we can do the same thing with looking at how trees fall. We can look at how trees fall on the lines, and etc. Have you thought about applying the concept of digital twins to moving forward in terms of of your industry, the electric industry, the industry that we're talking about?
Yes, so we're never going to be in the digital twin business. That's not what ServiceNow does. What we want to do is once the customer, the utility, has their arms around their assets, right? They know all of where their assets are, what their relationships are with each other, who owns that asset, what's the current state of that asset, what's its life cycle, all of that. Then partners that have capabilities in our ServiceNow store. I think the only one that we have today for digital twins is a company out of Europe called Waylay, where you could hook up something like Waylay that would take our asset model, and marry it with their service graph to be able to do these scenarios. We're never going to be in the digital twin business, but we can enable it, right? We're a conduit. We're an orchestration layer for all this great technology that's happening around us, and leveraging the platform to orchestrate it. So what we would love to see, and I know our leaders in the industry sector, is we want more of those digital twin players, those innovators. Come to the store, bring your stuff to the store. We'll find a way to work together to enable and help our customers solve some of these issues, in terms of being able to do a simulation, let's say at a substation, and understand if we're going to make this change, or we're going to transform this piece of a transformer, whatever the case may be, what is that impact to the substation without ever having to take it down, without ever having to, kind of thing. So that's where we see ourselves going. We want to continue to bolster this ecosystem of innovation, of great leaders and partners out there thinking about these scenarios and then bringing them into the fold of the platform to help customers with some of these issues.
Yeah, good answer.
Well,
You enable them. Good. Go ahead, Llewellyn. I'm sorry.
no, please.
Amanda, I have a question for you. You've been traveling on an RV. I suspect that traveling in an RV, and I suspect it's a diesel RV, and finding where to park and finding where to charge the thing is probably as complicated today as it is to do the whole electric vehicle thing. What are your thoughts on that? And would an electric RV make sense? What are your thoughts?
Gosh, they eat power. I just, maybe if battery moves really quickly, and I don't know. I could see a hybrid RV coming out, probably smaller versions of it. But it's really not that difficult at all. Like I said, there's enabling technology out there that helps me plan the entire trip, book all my RV sites, where I'm going to stay, making sure every site has, connectivity, has the right hookups, that has the right, amount of space I need. So there's these enabling technologies that I use to book the whole thing. So it's quite similar to what I'm describing here in terms of partnering and bringing the ecosystem. But there's a lot of people doing this. It's its own world. I would kind of crack it up to people that are big Harley Davidsons. They have their own places that they go, and it's a community of people, and we're very helpful to each other when there's issues and challenges. So it's a little bit of a family with every site that we end up.
And I'm curious, are you carrying anything else like motorcycles or bicycles or a car, or it's just
no, we're towing a Jeep. Okay. And my husband has this really high-end scooter that he uses to, bop around and go to the park and, go pick up packages from the office and things like that. But that's it. It's just us.
And tell me about something. The whole package delivery system has evolved dramatically with the Amazon lockers and all that. So I suspect that delivering anything and buying anything online and get it delivered where you want to be tomorrow is easy.
It breezes. I mean, I've had 6 packages delivered while we've been here this week. So, and then if I can't get it, Amazon say, well, I can't get it in the next 2 days, but I can get it to you next week. So I just plug in the address from where we're going to be the following week, because we travel every Sunday.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting. Can I go back to the grid and what I think of as the edge of the grid, or external assets, where the consumption of electricity is changing, and so is the provision of it, where we have DERs and generators that are not part of the system, but are becoming integral to the system. Rooftop solar, particular installations that have their own capacity to generate, hospitals, data centers, etc. How do your programs encompass those? And is there room for them to grow? Do you have ways of accommodating and assisting, say, a school bus depot that may want to become a generator down the road when they switch to electrified buses?
I don't know if our platform would get too involved in that. Like I said, we could partner with people that are doing enabling type services onto the platform, or helping to track or manage those assets on the platform. I don't think, Llewellyn, I didn't hear the first 20 seconds of the question.
Oh, sorry.
So
I was just
heard the last half.
No, I beg your pardon. I'm having some problem with my computer. My question is, how do you accommodate the world of DER, where you've got new generators that are not part of you? I've called it the Uberization of the net, where you have a lot of people who will be not only taking electricity off the net, but possibly providing it to it. And what sort of programs do you offer to encompass that and to manage it?
Yeah, so so my answer is probably the same. So from a DER perspective, in terms of how that ecosystem would change with things like microgrids or, large, let's say residential neighborhoods that are all putting solar on their roofs that could provide capacity back to the grid. That's not something ServiceNow would do. We would be involved with the service management of that component, right? So we could initiate tickets and requests and things like that, both externally to the in-state resource that we may be that the ISO might be working with, or even internally with ERCOT processes or ISO processes internally that would be managing that. The other thing that I would say on top of that, just nothing to do with ServiceNow, is I'm not sure the ISOs are ready for that either. And I don't think we're there. I think they're thinking about it. I know when I was at ERCOT, our leadership was really focused on how do we ready ourselves for what's coming. I mean, some of these huge manufacturing plants and neighborhoods that are coming up around, and I think I even saw something about Disney World potentially kind of doing something similar. I don't know if we're ready for it. But the platform wouldn't necessarily, be managing the inner workings of that, but we would, from a request and service management standpoint, help support that.
How can I measure your company if I were writing about it in revenue, employees? Is it traded on the stock exchange? Tell me about it.
We are traded on the stock exchange. We have 20,000 plus employees. We have an aspiration to get to 16 billion, Bill McDermott's goal. We have, tens of thousands of customers around the globe. So Bill McDermott speaks on a regular basis. I can't imagine having a better CEO than Bill in terms of where he wants to take the organization and where we're going to go. I've never been prouder to work with someone so caring about the people that work for him and the kinds of investments he's making in their customers. I mean, I'm a field chief technology officer. I'm one of many around the globe. He has a whole group for field innovation officers and field chief transformation officers. And everything I do for our customers is 100% free. Doesn't charge them a thing for this kind of service that we provide to the customer. So it's a very customer-centric organization.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
So Amanda, when you look at, I'm looking at the time here, and we're coming to, unfortunately, there's a good end for a fabulous time as usual. When you think about work, and I suspect that when you're stopping in these locations, you're trying to, if you can, see customers as well. What's ahead of you the next 6 months, sort of into the Christmas time frame? Where are you going to be? What are you looking forward to? Are you going to be attending any events while you're doing this amazing journey? What's happening in September, October, November, December?
So we're heading south, back south. We'll be in the Carolinas for the foliage season in October. And then after that, we're headed back to Texas for a week for Thanksgiving, to see some family. And then we'll be spending all of winter in California. So my plan is to spend as much time with customers out at our headquarters in California for the wintertime and get as many customers as I can out there and get them face to face. I do a lot of webinars. I do a lot of speaking at remote events. I try not to do too much travel unless it's for a customer, directly with a customer, where we're doing some kind of workshop or architecture planning or something like that directly with a customer. But the wintertime will be in California, hopefully spending a lot of time at our corporate headquarters there.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, if I'm not so aware of ServiceNow, and I really am missing out because I'm not, because it's a next generation company with great technology. what should I be thinking about, or how should I begin to think about how do I make a phone call for Amanda to come and help me? What should be what is the easy low hanging fruit for that?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's meet. My door is always open, especially somebody wants to talk about.
What would be my ask for you? What is the one process or the one area that I should be looking at to really get the benefits from you all?
So the journey to be CSI in the cloud would probably be where a lot of people would want to start. How do I do that? And what does my configuration look like, right? So that's the first step that most customers like, help me get this data into the cloud and get it off-prem, and being able to capitalize it, right? So a lot of these customers are capitalizing the spend today. So that's the first step, is let's talk about what that journey looks like for a utility, or if you're a technology vendor, reach out to me. Let's talk about how we get you into the ecosystem, and put your products into the ecosystem so our customers can use them. So I think about it in mutual, or if you're a service provider and you're a partner servicing utilities and you want to talk about how you get into our service provider ecosystem, reach out to me. I'll get you connected to the right people and help you figure out how to do that.
Are there any utilities going beyond that and saying, you know what, we are going to embrace ServiceNow in such a way that we're going to build our next data assets on the ServiceNow platform?
Data assets? What do you mean by that?
Well, all their new processes, all their new systems, everything could run your workflow engine, right?
Well, yes. I mean, for the utilities, since the release was just last year, there's people just getting onto getting this information into the cloud. But I do have a handful of utilities that have that vision, right? I have some CIOs and CEOs going, we need to standardize on this platform, and this is our vision, and I'm building out 3 to 5 year roadmaps for them on how to do that. But it doesn't happen with every utility, right? You have some companies that are like, you guys are just an IT ticketing system. And then I have to start the journey to convince them otherwise. So I spend a lot of time doing that.
Got it. Gentlemen, final thoughts.
I think it's interesting, everybody going to the cloud. I'm old enough to remember when we had a dumb computer and a server, and we didn't call it a cloud. But I think also that you will see some return to that dumb computer from the cloud back to the internal works of the companies in the future, where they would have their own quote cloud. So I would encourage you to keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, you're right at the center of the cloud and how people do business internationally. And given that blockchain is there, where we can see all of the different kind of interactions that go on, continue to do great things. And I just don't understand how somebody can leave Texas and go across America. I'm thinking that we might not let you back in the state.
Oh.
It's a disgrace to Travis. It's a disgrace to the great state of Texas for someone to leave Texas for so long and then consider themselves, after they have been bombarded with all of those ideologies out there outside of Texas. But we're going to make an exception for you.
Oh, I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
I thought it was very interesting. I get a little lost in some of the technology because I don't speak geek well. But I thought it was an interesting company and very interesting work you do. And I salute you for traveling around the country. I think that's really a cool thing to do.
You could have traveled around Texas, taking a longer.
I did that. I've done all of Texas.
Been there, done that. She's a pioneer. So enjoy Gettysburg. Enjoy the rest of the trip. Don't forget that it's baseball season. So if you can catch a baseball game, before the season is over. And obviously football started, so you can catch a football game. That would be awesome too. We look forward to keeping in touch. I know that David Forfia says hello.
Oh, yes. One of my favorite people.
Yeah.
Hi, David.
And we are going to have our own Digital 360 Summit coming up in 2 weeks, and it's this September 26th through the 29th. Sorry, Amanda, you're gonna miss it, but maybe you'll be there next year or
Yes.
not. You may be still traveling next year. So, it's a great time to visit and connect, and look forward to hearing more about the successes of ServiceNow. And we'll see you soon, and be well, travel well. Johnny, take us away.
Not too long ago in 1944, when everybody's son was going off to war, they had to lift their spirits high. For to say motherhood and apple pie, instead of spending money that they did not have on hot spots in the Bronx, they went to hear that kind of jazz. They played it funky, toast, and if you wanna jump, shout, knock yourself out. Boogie woogie beat is what I'm talking about. You could have a heap of jeepers if you dance all day. The boogie woogie music, piano man is going to town. It had the kind of music that would cleanse your soul. Honking and the country from them off the walls, and they would preach and their gin. And if the cops came, they all came in. So everybody partied till the cows came home, cause that's what boogie's for. And every night that dump would jump, coming back for more cars and bitches jump. That was for you, Lee Olive.
Johnny, you're full of surprises. You know so many songs. It's crazy.
I do. That's for my
Bye.
class tradition. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Remember,
Bye. Thank you, Amanda.
There's a baseball team in Dallas and there's a football team in Dallas.